All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. I am with Scott Osborne from Ulladulla Mowers, and if you have been on LMCA, you've heard of him before, you've seen his funny comments pop up, and sometimes actually wise, helpful comments. Former contractor, now running a lawn, what did you call it? I was going to say a lawn mower business, a mower shop. What do you call them, Scott? I've forgotten.
Mower Shop, Outdoor Power Centre,
That's what you do.
House of Pain. There's a few words for it.
Yeah. Regret. What else could you call it? No, I actually asked you on the podcast 6 months ago because I had a while ago, I had this epiphany where I realized that some of us contractors are the same sort of thing to you as some of our clients are to us. And what I mean by that is that we have clients who come to us all the time and they're well-meaning, they're nice people. I'm not talking about the absolute arrogant jerks, but they're well-meaning, nice people who just think that you could do a lawn mowing service for $30. And they're like, yeah, you could make that work, like surely? Because they're just clueless. And I had a conversation with my dealer actually, and he's somebody who I'd like to get on one day as well. And what he said to me, and this shocked me, was that he would make about $50 selling a lawn trimmer. And I was like, wow, $50. And he was talking about not just necessarily the cheapest of the cheap, but some expensive lawn trimmers. Because he goes, it depends on how long you have to spend talking to the client and how long, or what your expenses are and all that sort of stuff. But, you might have more margin than that. But at the end of the day, the profit is not that high. And it gave me a new perspective for mowing businesses because it is tough. And I've had a few chats since then. So I wanted to get you on. This is a long intro. Sorry for that. But I wanted to get you on because you're a mower dealer and this is your world. And we're all contractors listening to this. And I wanted to see what your story is like and a little bit more intrigue for you. You were a contractor, you were in our shoes. And if you watched the Skag podcast that we did, Duncan messaged you as the guy who apparently convinced Skag to bring in stand-on mowers way back, 2010 or something like that. Is that right?
It was 2011 actually, yeah. So 2011 I approached Skag after about a 9-month go with right standers. So so I initially discovered the right stander just by accident, looking for something else online, way before social media started. And as soon as I saw the stand-on concept, I went, well, I can make money doing this. I could instantly see it replacing a walk-behind mower, which it did. Mm-hmm. So bought a right, and the cut quality wasn't that good. I'm sure they've fixed that. But the the efficiency was sensational, and so I thought being that entrepreneurial mind of mine, I thought I could make money out of this and help other dealers. And I was a Jim's mowing guy, so I had access to the Jim's group, and so I became a right dealer. But I only sold a handful because I just couldn't get stock. The importer at the time, just wasn't telling me what was going on. He just couldn't finance the stock. So basically I needed another option because what I was doing was working. And so all my research led me to Skag. I'd never seen a Skag, apart from in a magazine or something. I'd never actually seen one. And so I approached International Mowers, which Duncan owns now, and said, look, I've got this business model. If you bring in the stand-on mower, the V-Ride, I can sell them for you. And they were just adamant, no, there's no market for it in Australia. And we went back and forth for probably about a month. And they're Melbourne-based, as you know. And then they said, look, we'll be up, all the hierarchy will be at Diesel, Dirt and Turf in Sydney, which is like a big field day, outdoor power thing. Mm-hmm. And come and meet us and we'll have a chat. So I went up there, and so from Ulladulla to Sydney is a couple of hours drive, so no big problem. Went and met the big boss, whose name was Phil, and he was an old farmer, cocky style bloke, pretty laid back, and he just said, what's your plan? I said, look, there is a market for these things. If you bring them in, I said, if you bring me in 6 36-inch machines, the 32 didn't exist then, you bring me in 6 36s, make me a dealer, I will buy them, and it's my job to sell them. And he just said, we made the trip and we'll give it a crack. So they brought in 6, and the first year I sold 24 of them. So
Wow.
yeah, so we're off and running. Yeah, I think I was like the number one skag dealer in 2012, the first like 2011, 2012 financial year. And
Wow. Were you
yeah,
still a contractor at this
yeah, I
stage?
was. Yeah. I sold my mowing business in January 2014. January 2014. Yeah. So yes, I was still a contractor, and because I was in the gyms group, and the gyms guys were really good because they, you know, whether you like gyms or not, at their core they want the business to grow, so they want more contractors, they want more franchisees, so they want their franchisees to be successful and sell splits. So they were more than happy for me to come along to the conferences and take up, you know, half an hour to an hour of the time of the conference to talk about the stand-on mower concept, first right and then skag, and and basically they'd make other people pay to go, but for me it was just like, just throw $100 on the bar on the final night and that'll do, which, you know, that was a lot of fun too. So that with that I had a lot of success in the early years, and I was also dealing with Glenn Camilleri from Easy Rental. Before all this, like low interest, low doc loans, sorry, 0% interest, all that started. Glenn, who was another ex-gyms guy, he started Easy Rental, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of it. It is a good way for guys to get in when they don't have good figures, or they don't have figures because they're too new in the business. And it was good for me. I ended up renting all my ride-ons through him because it made good tax sense for me. But that's another story. And yeah, so with Glenn helping to finance guys into them, the gyms network allowing me to showcase what they could do, it went crazy for a few years, and then it just sort of died. Like the stand-on movement just stopped basically. The traction just went away. And
when was this? What year do you think?
Probably about 2015. Yeah, about 2014, right. About 2015. It sort of coincided when I went into the business and opened the Mower Shop, and I don't know really. I guess it was like a fad. Like probably 3 years ago, the 32-inch V-Ride was the fad. Everybody wanted one, and like we couldn't. When I say we, as in skag dealers, you couldn't get enough, and then that sort of, it didn't die, but the sales petered off, and then the next thing, right, became the next new thing. Do you know what I mean? Where, like on LMCA, if you take a 1,000-foot view and look down, you see these trends come and go. Where,
yeah, they do.
Yep. People were on the skag wagon, and everyone wanted a V-Ride, especially when the 32 came out. Like that was a game changer for skag. It was such a good idea to do it, and. And then, you know, sort of rights come along, and then it sort of moved from right to ego. So totally different products, but the fad at the moment is ego. Okay, three good brands, three good products, all doing different things. So I think the fad on the V-Rides back then, and social media sort of was really just only starting to take off. People just went away from stand-ons. It was weird. And then the 32 came, and it all come back, and it's not going away now. So that was my sort of overly not brief history on how I got involved with number one stand-on mowing and number two with skag. So I'm pretty proud of that. The fact that I helped the stand-on mower come to Australia. I didn't have the first right stander that I know of in Australia. I had the first rapid height right, which was the first one with an actual height adjuster. The other ones you had to shim the deck up and down, which was...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I took one look at one because they had it in a 32 because I thought, the 32 is a good idea. But I took one look at one and went, no, I'm not going to be able to... Number one, I don't want one. Number two, I'm not going to be able to sell one. So, yeah, it was... I actually got my book when I was a right dealer out, you know, when everything was still handwritten, you know. So 26th of the 8th, 2009, I got my first right stander.
Gee. Well, I don't want to make us all depressed, but do you remember what that cost back then? Because it's
they
with
were
inflation, I'm sure it's going to
yeah.
sound so cheap.
Yeah, they retailed for 10 grand for the right.
Gee.
And the
yeah. And what would they be now?
I don't know about rights. They're a bit cheaper than Skags. I'm guessing they're about 15 now. I guess maybe 16. The V-Ride, when I first got those, they were just under 11, and now they're 18. So yeah, inflation has come a long way. Having said that, when I got out, and again, I'm in Ulladulla, which is a small coastal town, so you don't get the high rates that guys in metro areas do for mowing. When I got out, a normal house lawn, say a 700 square metre block with a house and shed on it and stuff, garden shed, that was about 40 to $50. That was a going rate when I got out, so 2013, say. Now that's $80, so it's almost doubled. So it's all relevant, if that makes sense.
Relative, is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's all relative, yes.
Yeah. But I think, on the whole inflation thing, there was a time, if you could have foresight, there was a time around 2020 where finance was so cheap and then inflation went so high that the wisest thing to do was to load yourself up, and people take this with a grain of salt, but load yourself up with exorbitant debt. Because I didn't realize it, but I fluked some loans at that time that the finance was so cheap that by the time I got to the end of the loan, inflation had meant that I had paid far less money for the product and the loan than the product now costs, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
totally.
That hustler behind me, the stand-on hustler, is one of them where, if I remember correctly, it was about $14,000. And the finance rate on it was incredibly cheap. And then by the time that the finance finished on it, they were $19.99 for the same mower.
Yeah.
And it was I can't remember how much, but I might have paid $2,000 in interest or something. Don't quote me on those numbers. I got a truck at that. I got other things. And I actually wanted to get more. There was stock problems and everything. But there was this kind of I guess from probably 2010 to 2020, prices sort of went up, but not crazy. And then, bam, now they're insane.
Yeah, since 2020, since COVID, most of my suppliers are having a fairly decent price rise, either every 6 months or every 12 months.
Yeah, crazy. Well, I mean, going from a contractor to a dealer, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was that's something that a lot of contractors dream of, or think about at least, because we all get old at some stage and they go, well, I've got all this knowledge that I've accumulated from 10, 15, 20 years, but my body can't handle the mowing anymore. They float that idea, they think about it. But like I said, I have these conversations with some with some dealers where it seems like it's really tough. So what would your evaluation be for people who are considering becoming a dealer?
It is very tough. The big thing is that you're going from just selling a service, which is what you physically provide to the customer at their house, to being retail, and then providing a service on top of that with your workshop. And your product knowledge has got to be bang on and about everything you sell. And that's probably it's mentally draining dealing with customers all day. And look, 90% of customers are fine, but that 10%, I mean, it's the same in any business. It's that, either the 80-20 or 90-10 rule, whichever way you want to look at it, is that you've got that 10% that you just want to strangle, but you can't. And they
legally.
and they really do sap your energy. So for us, I had an argument, and I won't say the brand, but I had an argument with a tech services would be the best way to describe him, about an issue I was having probably 12 months with a piece of equipment, and he So I rang him and just said, look, I'm doing this and I'm just a bit stuck on how to proceed. What's the next procedure? And his response was, you've done the training, you know how to do it. And I saw red because I'm asking for help, and I said to him, look, I have to know everything about the Skags, all the brand, all the models. I have to know everything about all the Husqvarnas. I have to know everything about all the Toros, the mass sport stuff we stock. I have to know everything about all the generators we sell, the fire pumps and stuff we sell, and then I have to know all about all the accessories, what fits what. I can't remember everything, and that sort of thing is really draining. The other thing that is what people don't probably realize is that the overheads of running a business is probably 50 to 100 times bigger than running a lawn mowing business. Unless you've got a massive lawn mowing business, like with a gang of, several trucks and 10 plus guys, etc. And most contractors are usually a 1 to 2 to 3 man operation. You're talking a $10,000 a week wage bill before you've opened the door on a Monday. That's you've got to hold so much stock. Like our stock levels at work float between $700,000 and $1 million all the time, because you've got to have it. If you don't have it, so we're obviously Husqvarna, Skag, etc. 2 blocks away is a still Gravely Hustler shop. So if someone comes in and they want to spend 10 grand on a zero turn, and I don't have anything in that ballpark, but the opposition 2 blocks away does, I don't know about you, but when I decide I want to buy a new drill, I either jump online or I get in the car and I drive to Bunnings and I buy a drill. If they don't have one, I'll go to Mitre 10 and buy one because I want one that day.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got to hold so much stock, and then you've got to manage customers, which you do in mowing. You've got to manage staff. You've got to coordinate, absolutely everything. You've got to coordinate the pickup and deliveries of ride-ons. It's just, it's full on. It's really full on. And there's no real, you don't get rainy days, whereas, you might get a rainy day when you're mowing, and it might throw your schedule out a bit, but you get a break. You get to pot around in your shed at home, do your maintenance, catch up on your bookwork, maybe watch a movie with the wife, or just chill. In retail, there's just no such thing. It could be torrential rain outside or snow. You still got to be there. And that's do I regret going into a lawnmower shop? Most of the time, no. A lot of times, yes, but then, I went into the mower shop because I couldn't get a job. I didn't know. I got out of lawn mowing and I was physically and mentally busted, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And there was just no real jobs going. I was happy. I would have been happy just working at Bunnings or, working on a building site as a labourer. I didn't really care what I did. But, because I couldn't, after about the first 4 or 5 months, I didn't even look. But then after that, I got bored and, okay, I need to do something. And because I couldn't find anything, and I had all this knowledge, and I'm not a licensed mechanic. I come from a family of them. So I do have a lot of mechanical background. I'm a fairly strong mechanical background. So I'd always done most of my servicing and major repairs and stuff. So I thought, well, what do I know? I know the outdoor power world. I know lawnmowers. I know brush cutters. I know chainsaws. And it was just a way of employing myself again. And for the first 18 months, 2 years, I pretty much just did crosswords and Sudokus. And then someone would come in and, you might see, 5 people walk through your doors in the first week, because I started a new shop. I didn't buy an existing one. Yeah. So Yeah, and I deliberately went near the opposition to be a convenient opposition to them, which has worked in the long term. It has worked. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you back on the money stuff, because I think when you're a solo mowing guy, there's a reality of business that is not familiar with you because you don't have to deal with this. But when you start having employees and you start having massive expenses like stock, it's not accurate to say that someone's running, say you sell a line trimmer and you make a 10% profit margin. That's not accurate, because you might make that on average over the course of a year. But the reality is you need to sell X amount of product in the week before you make a single dollar. And that's the challenge that people have when they have any shop that has employees or a large amount of expenses. Because if you have $10,000 of expenses and you sell $10,000 of line trimmers, like you're at $0. You're not making a 10% profit from each line trimmer. You need to sell $10,001 worth of product to make it work. And that can be really stressful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, to be honest, like if my wife wasn't in a well-paid profession that she is, I would have had to close the doors probably after about 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was just like she was paying all the bills at home. I was, still doing 50 hours a week, which I still do, but not making any money because you're buying more stock, you're making mistakes. It's just like when you first start lawn mowing, you make all these mistakes, and you hopefully learn from them. And it's the same when you open a retail business, whether it's a lawn mowing shop or a clothing shop or any sort of store. You got to learn what sells and what doesn't. What brands sell and what don't. You can have the best brand in the world, but if no one knows about it, you're really pushing shit uphill, really. So there's all that to take into account. Like for instance, when we put on a new brand, I will literally do 3 to 4 months worth of research. And a lot of that is product knowledge, as in, number one, me getting to know the product, but number two, how much public knowledge is there of the product? And is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk putting in something that A, is extremely good, but no one knows the brand, as opposed to something that's pretty good, but everyone knows the brand? So it's constant, and that you're constantly getting people, getting companies coming to you wanting you to stock their stuff.
Right, and I want to touch on this then, because there's so many little things you just touched on there. But my understanding is that when you have certain brands, the really big players, they say you can only stock us if you don't stock these people, or if you stock us. Completely out of the industry. I'm a guitarist, and I was talking to a guitar shop owner, and I said, "Why don't you sell Fender guitars? Very famous brand of guitars." And he goes, "Well, if we sell Fender, they require us to have X amount of guitars on stock at all times, and depending on which other brands we have, they will change our margin. They would change our costs. If we have the bigger brands or we have this or whatever." And this is like 5 years ago that I heard about it. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like that makes it really challenging. Then I found out that line trimmer, lawnmower business, they're the same. It's a very similar thing. The big players will come in and say, you can only stock so many products.
I believe.
Am I understanding correctly?
Yes and no. So the two big players are still in Husqvarna. Obviously, I'm a Husqvarna dealer, but I do know that still are pretty ruthless. If you put in certain brands, I don't like legally they can't stop you. It's a restraint of trade, but they can cut your margins, and that's all in your contract that you sign. and you'd be mad. Like if you had still, you'd be mad to walk away from being a still dealer. I mean, it's the biggest brand in the world. Same with Husqvarna. It's the second biggest brand in the world. Like Husqvarna do not cut our margins, but we do have stocking minimums for different levels. So you need to stock X amount to be a bronze dealer, X amount to be a silver dealer, gold, whatever. That sort of stuff with Husky is pretty easy to manage, I must admit. They're pretty good. They get a bit cranky when you do stuff, but they don't cut your margins. When I say cranky, is like the reps get a bit disjointed. If you put a brand in that is directly competing with them.
But you're kind of like the child stuck in the middle of a divorce in a certain sense, because you want to be friends with everybody who's a dealer who you're dealing with, but they all hate each other because they're all enemies.
Yeah, look, I find most reps are pretty good. Like at the corporate level, I'm sure there's a hatred and they've got dartboards of each other. But like most reps I know, like there's a couple that sort of keep to themselves as they'll come through, and if there's another rep in the store, like they'll just leave and go and get a coffee and come back later. Or they'll just, I'll give me a wave and say I'll catch you next time because they don't want to be in the same room. And there's a bit of probably professional etiquette there as well. But most reps are just decent guys, and they're doing their job, and they'll say good day to each other. And there's a couple of them I know that they tend to follow each other up and down the New South Wales coast, and if they're in the same town, they'll quite often catch up and have a beer at the pub, and they'll just talk anything except work, because they're both decent guys. So that I'm sure it goes on at the corporate level and the high above the reps level, but as a dealer, I don't see it. You hear stories, but I personally don't see it, and I wouldn't tolerate it anyway. Like if someone wants to come and try and lean over me, well, they'll
give a big kiss.
Yeah, I just won't tolerate it. Like I've got too much stuff to do. Like instead of trying to pacify a brand, like if I've got the brand in my shop, I'm trying my best to sell as much of it as I can. And we sort of do. We put something in. If it doesn't work, we pull it out. Like say thanks, but perfect example. Like we put in Yamaha golf cars, so a little bit out of our lane, but they came to us, said we've got this massive area where we don't have any presence in, and there's golf courses galore where I am, and we thought there's good margin in the product. We'd have a massive platform to work off, but it didn't work. It just, for the amount of real estate the machines took up, for the return we got on them, we discounted the last of what we had and got rid of it and just closed our account with them. And there was nothing personal. It was just, hey, it didn't work for us. Yeah. So and that sort of measuring, I guess, is the best way to describe it. You've got to measure what you're doing constantly. You've got to be looking at reports constantly. Like I have a really good accountant who's a mate of mine, and we literally sit down. I go to his office every quarter, and we sit down and we run through absolutely everything. And this is what's been selling. Here's where the money is. Here's where the money isn't. Look at how much room golf carts were a perfect example. Look how much room they're taking up in your showroom. That's valuable real estate. They've made you bugger all in the last 12 months. Get rid of them. And it's all there. It's not just a gut feeling that I don't think this is working. It's figures. You've got to take the emotion out of it, which is really tough for me because that's how I am. I'm an emotional sort of guy. I wear my heart on my sleeve. But you've got to do that. You've got to remove that emotion from these decisions, and that goes for staff as well, which is probably the hardest part. Is when you've got to you know, give someone a kick up the arse or even sack them. You know, it's really it's tough because you run a small family business, and it's no different when you've got a lawnmower business and you have to get rid of someone. It's it's pretty taxing. So I guess to round out what you were talking about, a dealership for guys who have lawnmower contractors, is that it's just a totally different beast. Most of the time it's enjoyable, but I should say a lot of the time it's enjoyable, especially when I'm dealing with contractors. That's my love. Like, I love seeing contractors succeed. So I always bend over backwards trying to help make that happen. But yeah, it's a grind. Like, it's nothing like being in business yourself mowing lawns. Nothing at all.
So talking about like the floor space that you just brought up, because that brings a thought in my head where one of the things we do in our business, right, is you look at each different service you're doing. And if someone said to me like, okay, I will pay you, say, $100 an hour to mow a lawn, but I'm only going to pay you $30 an hour to trim a hedge, you would just go, well, I'm not trimming hedges. Like, why would I do that? I'm just going to mow more lawns. And I guess that's kind of what you're getting at with that example of having something on the floor that's not selling is kind of the same thing. I have limited time. You have limited space. And if you fill up your limited space with something that doesn't sell, it's like you've shot yourself in the foot. But I could just go, I'm not doing hedge trimming anymore. You've still got all that stuff sitting on the floor. And help me understand this as well. Like, I think it's different with different brands, but do you buy the stock up front, or do you have it on like consignment, and then when you sell it, you take, say, the $1,000?
So it depends on the brand. It depends on the brand. So some brands you've got to basically buy it up front, or it goes on your monthly account. So you basically, if you buy it on the first of the month, you've got about 60 days to, not 60 days, sorry, 30 days. And no, 45 days, sorry, 45 days. Others have what they call floor plan. So with floor plan so the biggest one was Wells Fargo, which is one of the biggest banks in the world, and they're pulling out of Australia altogether. A new company's come in. But the way it works is, say I order 5 Skags and I want them on floor plan. So they will sell the mowers directly to Wells Fargo or whatever bank it is, and then deliver the goods to me. Now, that goes onto my account with the bank, and I have, depending on the brand, either 60, 90, 180 days of interest-free terms. That means I say it's 180 days. I've got 180 days to sell that machine before I have to start paying an interest fee on having it there. So you start paying interest and capital. You start paying it down, at a it's a reasonably high rate. So you've really got to move them.
You got 6 months to sell that machine, or you start paying high interest.
Well, you start paying interest and you start paying it down. Yeah, that's correct. So that's the other thing as a dealer you've really got to do is you've really got to study the weather on, like, okay, what sort of season am I going to have? Be it winter or summer. Yeah. Okay, are we going to have a really cold, dry winter? Because if we do, I'm going to sell lots of chainsaws, so I need to stock up on Husqvarna chainsaws. If it's going to be a really cold but really wet winter, I'm not going to sell many chainsaws at all because guys can't go out and cut firewood because it's too wet. So you've got to be constantly thinking ahead. Okay, and then you've got to take into account the incentives that the brands give. If you take like one of my brands that we stock their ride-ons of is they don't do floor plan, but like if you buy 6 of these machines, we'll do 90 days terms and free freight. So 6 machines, free freight. You've saved a few $100 there. That's clear profit, and you've got 90 days to sell them before you have to pay for them. So you've got all these balls in the air. It's probably the an analogy.
Yeah, sounds really complicated.
Well, if you want to or you just ignore it and you're not successful. That's and because when I started off, like I was just, oh yeah, okay, yeah, give me 3 of those Skags and I'll take a couple of Graveleys and I'll order all this handheld stuff. Yeah, okay, it's cheaper if I buy 20. Okay, give me 20. And you just, and then 6 months down the track, you're going, oh shit, I got to pay for all this stuff and I don't have the money because I haven't sold it. So it's just this constant, dealing with what's the weather going to do, what's the finances like, what's the terms I can get, what's my freight situation like, what's my storage situation like, and what's the economy looking like, Because at the moment, this previous, like normally we'll sell, Still and Husqvarna do the same thing every wintertime, is that they'll have an autumn/winter sale where they'll discount their cheapest chainsaw that's normally around the $400 mark to under $300. So usually $259, $269. They both do the same thing. Now I'll normally buy 30 to 40 of those chainsaws because we normally sell between 30 and 38 a year. That's the average, 30 to 38. So we usually buy, depending what we've got left over, so we aim to have that 40 in stock as the thing starts, which we did this year. Because the economy's so bad, we sold 3.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So again, it's not those 30 odd chainsaws or whatever we ordered is, when you equate that to a ride-on, it's not as bad as what it sounds like, but it's still money that I've had to pay for that's sitting there. I mean, thankfully they don't go out of date. So like next year I won't order any because we've still got 37 of them in stock. But that also equates to floor space in my storage unit.
Yes.
So and it's cash flow. So when you're sitting on $700, say $1,000 worth of stock, and a lot of it you haven't paid for because you're on floor plan, or some will do consignment, not many, but some will do consignment. If you're, if you give me 6 of those, I'll take one of those big suckers that you might sell 3 a year if you do it on consignment. So you've just got these balls in the air constantly on your finances, as well as the economy, as well as the weather, as well as your staff, and
yes, okay,
yeah. So I'm probably not making it sound all that good, but
no. This is what I wanted to hear because I will have these conversations with other contractors about contractor life, and we all do it on LMCA, and it's like, oh, how ridiculous this person, why their lawn cut for $50, here's the photos, and we all laugh about it. But there's 200, 300 times as many contractors as there are mower shops. I don't know, I'm making up that number, but it's something like that. So
easy. Well, in my area, there are 2 lawnmower shops. There were 3 mower shops, myself and 2 others. One of them sold. It was a hardware store, and the new owners have basically just shut down the mower side of things, which is good for us. But so we've got two lawnmower stores in my area, and the last time I did a count, there was over 100 contractors just in my area. So,
but you're out in the middle of nowhere almost.
So I'm on the south. I'm on the south
drive
coast.
Hours just to get to you.
I'm on the south coast of New South Wales. So if you were, say, flew into Sydney, you're looking at a 2.5 hour drive to where I am. So yeah, Ulladulla's about, I guess, 20,000 people now, and then we've got all these little coastal villages north and south of us. So you've probably got a population all up about 50,000, maybe a little bit less, but a lot of it is holiday houses. So like at the moment now, it's peak season. Obviously, it's Christmas time, and like my normal commute to work, because I live quite close to the shop, is about 5 minutes. Today, if I went in at say 10 o'clock in the morning, that drive would take me 25 minutes because the traffic's just walking pace because there's just so many people here. So you've got all these houses, which facilitate for well over 100 contractors. So it'd easy be 100 contractors to every lawnmower shop, probably more.
So, but I guess because there's a camaraderie in the contractor scene because of these stories, and we all know these unreasonable clients. But that's why I wanted to hear it, because I'm curious, because it's the thing I'm taking away right now is it's a lot more complicated than I thought, because you got to have your stock levels, you've got to have all your finance, and it sounds to me like you basically, to run a mower shop, unless you're incredibly well planned and you hit the jackpot and you timed the market right essentially, and you ordered the 30 chainsaws and they sold, and then you ordered this and they sold, and you got ahead, you're kind of always going to have that floor plan debt, which will be like an ever rotating debt, which is just the operational or just how it works in business. But then that would be a stress, like, on the because I'm also thinking like this, if you sold your shop, and people might go, well, you've got, say, like you say, $700,000 worth of debt, but let's say it's worth $1 million. I'm making these numbers up. People don't get too caught up in them. You go, oh, well, there's $300,000 difference. But when people sell the shop, they are selling these at a discount, right? So if something went really downhill, like, do you get left with debt? What happens?
Yeah, I guess if you were to sell, and look, and another thing is that my accountant has drilled into me in the last 2 years is to make an exit plan. Like, just don't keep going until you had enough, and then you go, okay, now I'm going to sell. It's just like, how do you sell? It might take, like, for instance, my father was self-employed his whole life. He's 80 now. It took him 12 years to sell his business to retire. So, because it was big, number one, it was a few $1 million to buy it. But so it's just like everything's the same on a smaller scale, is that you've got to, number one, you've got to have a buyer, you've got to have something that's sellable, and you've got to have your stock levels at a point where I think when you sell that, number one, it's affordable for someone coming in to purchase it, and number two, it's making money, so it's viable. So you're paying $1 million for something that actually makes you money. So that's something that we've been working really hard on over the last, probably really hard on the last 12 months. Not that I have an exit date, but I am in my 50s, so I don't want to end up like where Dad was, and so I want basically by the time I'm 55, which is 3 years away, I want the shop to be sellable. And then when I decide to sell, then everything's done.
Yeah.
Like, one of the big things that we've done over the last 12 months is build basically a procedure book. So when it does come time to sell, and we use it in other things as well, is that it's basically how to run the shop. So if someone comes in and wants to buy it, and we just go, well, okay, here it is. From the way you turn the alarm off in the morning to absolutely everything in this business, there's a procedure for it, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of man hours, and it's not just what I do, it's like what my admin guy does, what my parts interpreter girl does, what my workshop manager does, what the guys who do the pickup and deliveries, what they do. So everything, and literally we're probably only 40% into it of what needs to be done to make it attractive. So, but the research I've done is that a lot of lawnmower shops close down rather than sell. Because they can't sell. Because the next generation coming along has less, number one, have probably less inkling to run a business than the previous, and that goes for mine as well. Like a lot of my mates had no interest at all in running a business, but most of their parents probably did, and you've got, it's an industry that's getting harder, as in you've got more and more online options. Some of my brands I sell are having a bigger and bigger online presence, which it hurts. Like there's no two ways about it. Like when you get a $2,500 chainsaw show up that's been a click and collect, but I've still got to assemble it, pre-deliver it, put fuel and oil in it, run it, make sure it's right. But I'm losing quite a large percentage of the margin that I would have if I had sold it direct. That's a pretty tough pill to swallow. And then
so click and collect.
Yep.
Actually hurts the mower shop. It's not like a direct.
Well, you get something. You get something, but and look, I get that if you're a company like Stihl, Husqvarna, you've got to have an online presence. I get that. But where they hurt the dealer is because it's click and collect, you don't get the same margin you would if you sold it. If Luke Smith walked into my shop and bought that chainsaw, I make more margin than if he buys it online and picks it up from my shop. So that's where they make it harder. Then you got your guys like Sydney Tools, Total Tools, TKD. All those are just they're massive companies with a massive budget. So you've got to really look at what brands you stock to see who you're competing against, because of that online presence. So it's getting harder to be a retail business in this game. Not like brands like your Skags, your, not that I sell them, but your Hustlers, your Graveleys, your Bush Ranger, all that sort of like the big end stuff. That's never going to go online because you can't unless you have a truck with a forklift on the back. Then it's just, you're not going to get it home delivered. It's just not going to happen. So you've just got to work out what pond you want to play in. So for us, like we don't discount at all. So if someone comes in and wants us to price match, I've got to be in a really good mood to do it. Normally I'll just say no, because it's just a race to the bottom. And
100%, yeah.
The likes of Sydney Tools, or Bunnings. Bunnings is a perfect example. They got a bigger buying power than what we have as a mum and dad dealer.
Oh, of course.
Because they're buying. I might buy 35 chainsaws for wintertime. They might buy 35 container loads of, and they'll happily make 2% on each one, whereas I need to make 20%. So they can sell them at that slightly discounted rate, whereas the guy who's on a Sunday morning having his coffee shopping online can go, oh, here it is for $269, and the Ulladulla Mowers has it for $299, and they've got free shipping. There we go, I'll buy that. So that's making it harder again in the retail side of things. Where you fall back on is your workshop. If you've got a super efficient workshop, that's where there's good money in that. And again, that's another balls in the air thing where you've got to decide, okay, what product will I work on? What product won't I work on? If I'm going to work on this, like there's one product that we don't sell. It's a whippersnipper that's pretty common. It's a homeowner thing. They have carburetor issues all the time. So we went from spending an hour trying to get the thing to go to now comes in, we do 2 checks. If it fails both those checks, we just put a brand new carburetor on. And the customer gets charged a brand new carburetor. It runs. We fixed his problem. We made him happy. So problem solved. And again, that's an evolution in the business that you've got to constantly monitor these things. And to be honest, in my business, I don't have time to do that myself anymore. So that's where the guys in my workshop will come to me and say, hey, this is on this particular whippersnipper, for example, this is the amount of time we're wasting trying to fix these things. We can buy these carburetors for X amount. We pass that on to the customer. We're charging a flat rate for a service fee anyway. A lot of lawnmower shops don't do that. They do an hourly rate thing. But I've always been adamant on not doing that. I'm doing a fixed price, because then you can tell the customer up front, hey, it's going to cost you $90 plus our parts. And your parts could be $20 to $50 depending on what we need, maybe over. If we find something major, we'll call you. Otherwise, that's the ballpark. So they go away knowing that that's the sort of figure that they're going to have to pay. So if they've got a $249 whippersnipper that they bought from Bunnings, not that we work on that shit, but say that's for an example, is that they can go, well, I only paid $249 for it, and you're going to charge me like $160 or $180 to fix it. I'll just buy a new one. Go, okay, so the conversation's over. Whereas if you just say, okay, we're going to charge you $100 an hour, well, how long is it going to take? Well, we don't know. It could take 20 minutes. It could take 2 hours, because we need to work out what's wrong with it. So that the business has, it's probably the same in mowing, maybe to a lesser extent, but it's a constant reevaluation of everything you do. So, and you've got to be willing to adapt and change, which is probably one of my biggest skills, that I am willing to adapt and change. Like what I do in my business now is like probably 180 degrees to what I used to do in almost everything. You got to learn to delegate, which took a lot for me to learn how to delegate. But and a lot of times you don't get to delegate because the customer won't let you. They just want to talk to you.
Yes.
So that's
We're talking about this delegation aspect, because one thing I really is starting to appreciate now is the same sort of challenge we have, that you come to a client, the client expects, as a gardener, you go to let's say you're the lawn mowing contractor, right? You just mow the lawns. It is inevitable that one day a client's going to come out and say, I've got this problem with my lily pilly. There's this bug on it. Like, what is the bug? And they expect you to know that. And then somebody else has got a lemon tree, and somebody else has got whatever, rosemary hedge that's not doing as well, and something's growing slow, and something. So the longer you spend in business, the more you've got to become like, as a gardener, you've got to become a soil scientist and a mulch expert and a hedging expert and all that sort of stuff. And people, it's both sides. They expect incredibly high standards of knowledge from a gardener. And then some people expect a very low hourly rate, because they go, oh, well, you're just a gardener. You get both sides of the coin. And then it's so hard to hire somebody, because most people who go, well, I just want to be a lawnmower guy, and I don't mind doing that as a job, they just really want to mow lawns. And if they want that really high technical knowledge, they don't want to work for a contractor. They want to work at a botanical gardens, or they want to work at a private school. So it's so challenging. And now it's like, that's the same thing you guys are facing, because the client walks in and go, I've got this Husqvarna that's 15 years old, and I have this problem, and I've got the small budget, and you guys can fix it, right? And you're like, well, I've got to remember this thing, and what's that part? And oh man, and contractors are like, oh, I need this immediately, and whether it's my neglect or not, I don't even care. But I need you to give this back to me right now, and you need to have the problem solved and know exactly what it is. And it's so the level of knowledge is through the roof. The price expectation is through the floor.
Yep.
And then you have to train somebody else in all of that stuff. This is complicated, man.
Welcome to the wonderful world of business. It's
yes.
Look, for the most part, it's good. I thrive in challenging situations. That's my nature. I enjoy it. I come home and collapse afterwards, but in the moment, you've just got to surround yourself with the right people, and that's really hard. Because none of my staff are under 50. Sorry, I should tell a lie. I've got one just under 50. Everyone else is 50.
He's 49 and 364 days.
Well, it's a she, so I better not get that wrong.
Yeah.
I have tried to put on, I'm going to say off the top of my head, probably 5 or 6 young guys and train them.
Mm-hmm.
And they just don't have the attention span to do it. They don't want to do it. You can't keep them off their phones. So it's getting the right people is really hard. I've been really lucky, but I treat my workers like silkworms, and I always have, and I learned that from my dad. And you got some people, when they employ someone, like the first year apprentice they get treated like shit and get all the shit jobs, and they don't get any respect, anything like that. Whereas I'm totally the opposite. Is that when someone comes to work for me, I'm just like, hey, this is this big bucket of trust, and it's chock-a-block full, and I'm giving it to you, and it's your job not to spill it. You spill it, then we're going to have problems. So I'm going to trust you to do your best. Yeah, you're going to make mistakes because you're learning, but that's the way I've always operated, and I learned that from Dad. And with that, you get super loyal people. So I'm really, really fortunate to have, I've got 6 employees, and I can go away. That's another thing I was going to talk about. I can go away and know that they will, all of them, try 100% to have that business running the way I run it when I'm there. So I'm very, very fortunate in that way. It's, a lot of them could probably make more money going elsewhere, but they stick around because they love coming to work for me. They love the job. They get looked after, as I said. Just little things like, just treat them with respect. So, and that's, a mate of mine, he's a builder, and he has the opposite. He just treats his apprenticeships like absolutely, he treats them terrible. But he reckons that's the way he gets the most out of them, and he turns them into good tradies, and it might work for him, but it's not in my nature to be like that, and I just couldn't see it working. Because number one, if you start off where you've got this mutual respect, and the same can be with the customer. If you start off with this mutual respect, then if you don't drop the ball and they don't drop the ball, then you're all winning, And I'm a big believer in a rising tide floats all ships. So if we've had a really cracking summer, I will take them all out we've got some really nice restaurants here. I'll take them all out to a nice restaurant with their wives, shout the whole night, shout them all a voucher at a local massage place, things like that. And it's that I find if you give people a pay rise when they've done well, they start to expect it, more pay rises. But if you just surprise them with, hey, book out the first Saturday next month because I'm taking you all out to dinner because you've worked really hard this summer and it's been hot and it's been really busy and I really appreciate your efforts. Yeah. And you get it back in spades, man. You really do. So that's just a little aside. One thing I did note down I wanted to mention is that being when I was mowing, winter time's obviously your quiet time. So for me, I would usually have most of August off, and that's when we'd travel or have just have a break, have a holiday, go overseas or do whatever. Whereas now, retail, as I said, retail is basically 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year, with no real break at all, except we shut between Christmas and New Year. But apart from that, that's it. Is that I have an issue with winding down when I'm away. For instance, I cannot have a day at home working in the yard when the shop's open. I can't do it. I cannot do it. I get nothing done. All I do is stress. If I'm overseas or in a different state, different story because there's nothing I can do. Whereas, but if I'm 5 minutes,
Yeah.
if I'm 5 minutes away, and like I know that, yeah, not it doesn't happen because I can't let it happen. I just physically can't make myself do it. So you get that guilt that you should be there because it's your business. So other people may not have that, but for me, I certainly do. Is I really struggle to relax when I'm not at work, especially if I'm around work.
No, I know there's a saying for that. It's you've got to change your place to change your pace. And
Yeah, yeah,
there's people. It's like it's really common. I've seen that before. Like I was actually listening to a talk recently about rest, and just was part of it. And that's one of the things that he said. He's like the guy who was giving the talk was like, yeah, my wife she can rest wherever, and for me, he's got to go for a walk. He's got to go to the mountains. He's got to go whatever. He's got to get out of it. Otherwise, he can't stop his brain from working. I could have a nap on the couch back there, and I'd be fine, man. Like I don't need to go anywhere. But no,
yeah,
I can appreciate what you're saying there, and I can as well. Like you add like we said, the complications and everything. You're like, oh, someone's going to come in with a question that no one can answer except for me, and we're going to lose the
yeah,
sale, and oh
yeah,
man, it's so hard to turn off, isn't it?
yeah. And the biggest struggle I'm having at the moment is the robotic side of things. So we've invested in my business. We've invested very heavily into robots with 3 different brands because I can see. Well, I know it's the future, whether we like it or not. It's coming, and I think there will be advantages for contractors and disadvantages for contractors. But the fact is that it's coming, whether we like it or not. So I made a conscious decision probably 18 months ago to go all in on it and get ahead of the curve to be the go-to dealer in my area for anything robotic. So, and so far it's paying off. You know, it's working. We're moving quite a lot of machines, so I'm happy with that. But the downside is that I'm the robotic guy. So
Yeah.
yeah, so which means a lot of the time I'm out in the field. Which, don't get me wrong, I actually love it. I really love doing robots because it gets my brain doing something a bit different than I'm used to, and you know, because they come with a lot of challenges when you put them in. But it's just that new challenge I really enjoy. But when it's peak season, like I remember I did, it might have been a Cress install about probably March last year, something like that. I can't quite remember when it was. Anyway, it was just full on crazy times, and I was out a lot of the day, and I came back and it was just like, you need to call this guy, you need to call this guy, you need to call. There was 14 guys I had to call, and they were all important.
Oh, wow.
They were all important customers. You know, a lot of them were contractors. A lot of them were, you know, high-end customers that we look after. You know, like general managers of wineries and wedding venues and things like that. So not people that you could put off. So I was there till like 7:30 at night in the office just returning phone calls. And that's where I struggle in that I need, and like I've been looking to employ someone for close to 12 months to do the robotics, and it's just, I've found no one. It's
Well, if somebody wants a new job, then I'm moving to Ulladulla and they like robotics.
yeah, come and talk to me.
Hit up Scott. No, but I can totally appreciate that. I feel like with the robotics, it's because one of the questions I want to ask you is with robotics and battery being what people consider to be the future, there is less maintenance on them. So is that something that is a worry for mower shops because you don't get that side of the income?
At the moment, no. And there's a couple of reasons why. Is in the workshop, your money's in ride-ons. Your money's in doing ride-on servicing. And if you can drum into the customer when they hopefully buy one from you, is to stick to their service schedule, is that they're bringing you a mower with very little issues. It might have a niggly something, you know. Oh, it does this every now and then, or it's doing this, or it's it's cutting crooked, da da da. So you can
I've bent the blade, but I definitely didn't hit anything.
100%.
That wasn't me. That was
100%. Yeah, we hear that every day. So you can put a couple of techies on ride-ons and they just smash them out. And again, I've reinvested heavily in the workshop. The guys know their stuff. Like the first thing we did, we put in a full car hoist just to make it easier for the guys to work on machines underneath, like especially on transmission servicing and stuff. They came to me nearly 2 years ago and said, we're getting held up in our ride-on servicing because we only have one hoist, we need two hoists. Okay?
Yeah.
So I bought them a second hoist. And that second hoist was paid for within a month, because the efficiencies, again, went through the roof. So with the battery stuff, most of it's handheld gear. And and the people that are buying it, you got your contractors that run it. In my area, not many. It is starting to turn. We've obviously we do Cress, and we've just taken on Ego in the last few months. To have that option, because people come in asking for it basically. So between all the brands, we can offer a battery option and all different price pointing as well. But your $200 to $400 handheld equipment. They're the ones you don't want in your workshop. They're the one that's generally made in China, or they're made somewhere cheap. They're made to a price point, so the quality of the machine's not there. And it's just like then you come up with this. Okay, the service cost is $180, or for $249 I can buy a brand new one with warranty. So you're replacing that product with battery in my experience.
Okay.
And yes, in the full pro gear, you're probably going to see it a bit, but you're still going to have your ride-ons. Autonomous ride-ons will come, but they're a fair way away, I think. And they're a long way. They're going to be a long way off being affordable for a long time.
I also think, there's, again, we're touching on so many points. Let's stay on the battery versus petrol for the moment here. What is your opinion on this? Because it's a very divisive subject at times on the LMCA group.
Well, all my gear at home is now battery. All Husqvarna gear. And I love it. I really do. I love it. But I'm not a contractor anymore. So I guess it's just what, it's the you do you. If you like it, then it's right. If it works in your business, then it's right. If it doesn't work in your business, then it's not right. You might want to go battery because you don't have any mechanical knowledge at all. And if you don't, battery makes awesome sense for a contractor. But if it's not cutting the mustard and it's not doing what you want, and you're having, I wouldn't say you shouldn't have reliability issues, but say you're having runtime issues, then it's not the right option for you. But if it works for you, then it works. That's the same with any product. If it's doing the job, guys want to have those 4-wheel drive, rear steer, out front mowers. If they got work for them and it makes them money, then it's the right product. But it's not for the next guy. So with battery gear, I really think it's just for a contractor. It's really just if it's what you want and you're making money using it and you're happy with it, then it's the right product.
There's a guy on YouTube called GCI Turf, and I don't know if you've ever seen. He's an American guy, and he's got about 100,000 subscribers. So he does some pretty good stuff, and he's a bit of a character. He did this video last year, which I found fascinating, and I think it sums up this conversation really well. It was actually a stand-on mower comparison, and I think he got 14 brands. And he runs a business, and he has 4 or 5 employees. And so he got, I think it was himself and 2 or 3 of his most experienced leading hands. And these are guys 10, 15 years experience. And they got all the 14 mowers. and they had like 10 categories on what they thought: build quality, feel when mowing, all that sort of stuff. And they all rated them. They all used them for 2 or 3 days each. And these are brand new ones from the dealers. They all rated them, and they all rated them differently. And it was really interesting because it was like the better ones were better, but there were some where they were like usability 10 out of 10, and the guy next to him was like 7 out of 10. And like, to me, that's the difference between slightly above average or above average to perfect. And so someone's gone, well, this is perfect. And the next guy who works with him has been with him for 10 years has gone, oh, this is just above average. And then something else is, there was ones where someone's gone rated it a 4 or a 5 and someone else is rating it a 7. So it's like, well, this is like average or below average. So no, this is good. And I watched that whole series because there's multiple videos. Again, GCI Turf, if you guys want to have a look at it. And what he came up with at the end, he was like, here, I think it was 6 out of the 14. They were like, we all agreed these were good. We all agree these were at this top tier, but you have to go and try them yourself. And that was the message of it. There's not that common level of common sense when it comes to the online forums, because everyone's like, I can't believe you would ever buy this brand. Why would anyone ever do this? And someone else is like, this is the best thing ever. And it's like, well, it's the same thing happening. It's the same thing happening as what happened in that video.
Yeah, and another thing too with brands in particular is a lot of the time it's an important thing, and it should be important for the contractor, is that you've got to be buying something from a dealer who's got your back, that you have a relationship with. That if you do have an issue, that they're gonna, number one, they're gonna back you up and get you going quick. And a lot of guys fall into that trap. Like, they'll buy something because it's cheap, or they'll buy something because, it's on sale. It's not the cheapest product out there, and but it's got good reviews, and you got guys online saying, I love this thing, it's the best thing since sliced bread. So they go and buy it. But the guy who loves his has a great relationship with his dealer and in the next state, and you've bought it from your mower shop, who doesn't really care about contractors. So sometimes a lot of the time that should be more important than the actual brand. The fact that, fact that I tell you should buy an orange one and someone else should tell you should buy a yellow one. Sometimes the answer is buy a red one, because the guy who owns the mower shop in your area is a really good guy and he's got your back. He sells red ones. So there's the old saying, opinions are like arseholes, everyone's got one. So when it comes to the product, whether it's battery, ride-ons or whatever, it's got to, number one, it's got to work for you. If it works for you, then it works. But number two, you've got to buy a product that you're going to get backup from.
I want to change pace on this conversation in a minute, because I do want to ask you some honest opinions on tools.
Sure.
But there's one thing I've been wanting to ask the whole time, which is, and it came up with the robot mowers, and you got ride-on mowers, and you got line trimmers and everything. What is the most profitable thing that you could sell at a mower shop? Like, what's the thing that
to a contractor?
That if someone for anybody, like at a mower shop, you're like, if somebody comes in and they're like, I'm going to buy this, because you were talking before about what's certain low level items you're probably not making much from. But what's the thing that, like, this is, and I don't need profit margin idea, like the exact numbers, but what's the thing? Is it robot mowers? Is it ride-on mowers? What's the thing that's the best thing you could sell?
A ride-on mower. Yep, hands down. Because you've got good margins, a big ticket item, and you're going to get service work and part sales, for sure. Yep.
So going forward, if you're losing that margin or they're losing that sale to robot mowers, is that potentially problematic, or is it like, no, the difference is so minimal it doesn't really matter?
No, it's there. I basically qualify each buyer. So I'll come in and they go, yeah, we're looking at ride-ons, and the first thing I'll say is like, okay, tell me about your property. What do you got? And I got 5 acres. Okay, is it lawn? Is it grass? Is it scrub? What do you got? I got a bit of everything. or it's all manicured lawn. Do you have any rocks and stumps? Yeah or no, whatever. So you qualify the buyer. And number one is you want to get a sale. Number two is you want to sell them the right product, because if you do something right, they're going to tell 10 people. If you do something wrong, they're going to tell 100 people. So especially in a small town, that means a hell of a lot. So your reputation's everything. Now, so I'll qualify the buyer, and if I think a robot is an option, I will say to them, have you considered a robot? And I'll either get one or two responses. I'll just get, no, what? Robot? No. Or I'll get, really? A robot? You reckon that could work? So then I give them options. And I find the customers that are buying robots off me who could have bought a ride-on mower, a lot of times buy a ride-on mower anyway. Because the robot can't do, when I'm talking big property, so you're talking acreages.
There's a level of versatility there where it's like, you've got an overgrown paddock section. It's not really manicured grass. You 100%. Do it once every 3 months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's the same, like we sell quad bikes and side-by-sides. They're a very small part of the business, like very, very small. And if you're just looking at the figures that me and my accountant goes through, I shouldn't be selling them. But But I find that I have this stepping stone where someone will come in and they'll buy a side-by-side vehicle. Within 12 months, they're back and they've bought a ride-on, or the other way around.
True.
They'll come in and buy a ride-on. They'll see the side-by-sides. I go, I thought of those, but I didn't. I thought I had to drive an hour and a half to the shop north of me. No, we sell them, we service them. So it's just that nice little thing that goes together. So it's not a lost leader, but it's not far off it. Whereas the robots is the way I look at it is that not every customer who buys a robot off me is ever going to be in the market for a ride-on.
Mm-hmm.
But every customer I sell a robot to is an advertising, a walking advertisement for robotic lawnmowers from me, because we've put it in. We don't just sell them a box like we do the installs. So then all of a sudden they're telling the 10 people, hopefully more, that, hey, I bought a robot lawnmower. My lawn looks awesome. I don't have to mow it anymore. I can go and play golf, or I can go fishing. And the guys at Dollar Mowers did a great job. So the answer between your robot and a ride-on is it just depends on the customer, and every sale is important, I guess.
Let's change pace to asking you the technical questions that contractors sometimes want to ask. Maybe they don't feel like they're going to get honest opinions from certain dealers. I've got a few prepared, because you're a Toro and a Skag dealer, right?
Toro, Skag, Husqvarna, Massport, in petrol stuff,
Well, specifically Toro and Skag come to mind because two of the most popular mowers going around with contractors are actually the Skag 32 we talked about before, and the Toro 30-inch, usually a Time Master. Some people go for Turf Master, but people like the Time Master for lightness, etc. Now, I've got a 36-inch Standard. I've got the 30-inch Time Master, and I don't have a 32, and I'm really interested. Like, at what price or what moment do you think the value crosses over from getting a cheaper walk behind 30-inch to getting the full 32-inch? Because they're really not that much wider, but the price point is quite a lot different.
That's so I can give you a perfect analogy. Or perfect story. So I got a contractor who lives near me, young guy, and he didn't have a ride-on at all. He just had a 30-inch Time Master. And as you know, like, they have issues because they're not built for contractor work. So you got pulleys exploding, you got cables and belts issues. So there's always little issues going on with them, but on the whole, they're a money-making, they're a good asset to a business. I'll say that. So I had a guy, he had one of those, had issues, he bought a second one, and I spoke to him. I said, if you're buying 30, why don't you go 32 and you go a stand-on? And it was like, okay, well, you're talking under $3,000 to $18,000, like. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, look, you're going to be able to do more and more. And he didn't want to employ anybody. So, and he couldn't keep up. That was his other complaint. He couldn't keep up with his workload. There was plenty of opportunity to get more work, but he couldn't do it because he just could not get through the work. And we eventually convinced, it was more his wife convincing them to basically go into debt, get a loan for that 18 grand, which was $100 a week. So $100 a week over 5 years. The machine's got a 5-year warranty, so whatever you pay it off, it's under warranty. And so he ended up getting one. He came back to me, I don't know, 6 months later, I suppose, brought it in for a service. And he was saying that he can do 4 extra lawns in a day. And
wow.
So and I said to him, what's your average lawn? What's it cost? And he said, about $80. So by Monday afternoon, he's been able to do 4 extra lawns. The first 2 of those lawns, 1.5, so 2, so let's say 2 lawns. 2 lawns have paid for that mower for that week. And he can do another 18 lawns pure profit that he couldn't do before with a 30-inch. So that should answer your question.
$1,400, $1,200 or something like that. $80, yep. $80 times 18, yep. Something like that. Yeah.
So that's the scope.
Quick math off the top of my head.
So that's the amount of work he can take on in the same amount of time without employing anybody. And it's costing him $100 a week. But because he can take on the extra work, he's so far ahead in profit, it's insane. And he was just like, "This is the best thing I ever did. It's the absolute best thing," and he's just wrapped in it. And you're going from a machine that's has its place, but you're still walking behind it to standing, and you've got a stander, so you understand that concept. So you're more refreshed. You can do those extra 4 lawns a day and mentally cope with it because you haven't walked 20 Ks. So a stand-on mower, a 32 is, to my mind, the most efficient piece of money-making machine for a contractor. And what brand you get, that comes back to what I said about the dealer.
Yes, and from your perspective, it's got to be orange. People in your area.
Well, I am very passionate about Skag, I will admit, and it's taken a bit for other brands that I sell to understand that. Because my journey has been with Skag a very long time, obviously, with that discussion we had earlier. So, I'm very passionate about the Skag brand. Skag has been very good to me. I've sold a lot of their product, but they have been very, very good to me. I've been Australian Dealer of the Year twice. I've been to America twice that they've paid for. I'm on first name basis with all the owners and everyone there, and I get a lot of respect from Skag, I should say. So, but like I said, just because I say you should buy one, if your dealer doesn't sell them or your dealer isn't supporting you, and there's a yellow one or a red one that's going to fit your business, well, yeah, don't go. Yeah, I mean. But yeah, I'm very loyal to Skag.
The next question I wanted to ask is, because you're a contractor as well, you used to be a contractor, so you have this experience. Many years ago, I saw a guy who was a solar operator, and it was a photo on LMCA, and he had a bunch of ride-on mowers, and all different sizes. And I looked at that at the time, and I was like, that seems like a waste of money. Because there's this thing called resource utilization. You've spent 50 grand on these tools, but you can't use them all at once because you're solo. I changed my mind because your example right there is that somebody's making more money from a 32, but a 32 wouldn't fit a larger area very well. Like you want to do some real serious acreage.
Yep.
So I started changing my mind, and I was like, if I did a lot of ride-on work, it makes sense to have different size mowers if I wanted to go down that path, right? But then there's a certain threshold where you're like, well, if I got every single deck size, well, now you've overcapitalized. If you were in an area that had some acreage and money was not an object, what would you go? Would you go 72, 36, 32, 48? Or would you just get one in the middle? What would you do?
I can answer that with experience. So the setup I ended up with when I sold with the business was a 36-inch V-ride. They didn't make the 32 back then. So I would swap the 36 for a 32. And I had a 52-inch V-ride, and then I had a 61-inch cheater. So both the V-rides were set up with full mulch kits, which is mulching is conducive to my area. So I didn't do any catching. I did have what today would be called Catch Pro that I brought in from the States. It was a steel version. I did have that as an option on my 36. We probably used it maybe once every 6 weeks on an overgrown block, a fresh cleanup. So we would do 4 days a week, sometimes 3.5, but usually 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday. On the trailer, we would have the 36 and the 52 and just smash out house lawns, and you're sort of up to 1 acre. And then on Fridays, Thursday afternoon / Fridays, we would leave the 36 at home and take the 61 cheater, so you're sitting down, and the 52 V-ride, and we go and smash out the acres. And we'd use the 52 around the house where you're mulching, and the 61, which was side discharge on your open areas. And for mine, like all the setups I had over the 14 years of mowing, that was the ultimate. And just now you'd be having a 32 instead of a 36, just for those access issues. Having said that, when I sold the business, we had just under 200 regulars, and 150 of those were standard house lawns. And of those 150, we only had 4 lawns that we had to hand mow. So one was a hand mow front and back because the customer was insisted on it and paid extra. The other 3 were access issues. And by that stage, I'd really qualified each job. Like if I thought it was a $50 job, but then I couldn't get the V-ride in the backyard, then it was an $80 job. So it was either worth doing or I priced myself out of the market. So, and that's another thing contractors should look at is if you try and be all things to everybody, you don't tend to be as profitable, in my experience. If you have your niche that you want to do, whether it's you want to do hedging or acreage, or you just want to get a 32 machine and smash out house lawns, whatever if you can stay in your lane, I find that's where you become more profitable. Like I didn't do any gardening for the last probably 4 or 5 years of my mowing business. I would do hedge trimming for certain clientele in the wintertime when we're quiet, and some weed control. Not a lot. It was mostly just spraying Roundup. Like the knowledge that the guys on LMCA have today about weed control in lawns, and their product knowledge is insane. Like I was never like that at all. It was just smashing out lawns, and then in the wintertime, we'd basically just work 3 to 3.5 days a week, have a rest, consolidate, and do a bit of hedging for our regular customers that wanted it, bit of mulching, bit of weed control in gardens, and that was it. So my lane was mowing. That was it. And whereas if you're in an area where there's lots of hedging available, you enjoy doing it, you're good at it, you charge appropriately for it. If that's what you want to do, focus on that. And you do a little bit of everything. You do a little bit of other stuff. But I find if you, like for me, like my stuff was right on mowing to the point where all the other contractors in town, as soon as they got called for a job that was over like an acre, they just say, nah, just ring Scott from a Jim's Mowing. He's the guy with the gear. So I was getting referrals constantly from my opposition because I had the gear. And I was just like, I'm not spending the money. I'm not having 3 ride-ons. Like, I'm not doing that. Just give it to him. He'll give it to him. He'll let him do it. So that's that. I found that worked for me without wanting to sound like I'm telling everyone what they should do.
No, because the question was if money was an object. Because then the next question is, okay, let's say money is an object and you can only get one.
Yep.
So you're starting out, maybe in the future you want to go get different things, and you're in an area where you could potentially get into ride on like larger area stuff.
Yep.
Do you go a 48 that can kind of maybe do both, but then has access issues, or do you get the smaller one that has the access no problem, but then is slow on the big ones?
I would definitely go the smaller one, because the smaller one will do everything. Yes, a bit slower on some jobs, but the big one won't do, the big one can't do everything.
And the thing that I think as well, tell me if this is your experience. Just because someone has a bigger property doesn't necessarily mean they have a bigger budget for their mowing, right? So
for sure, yeah.
They might have acres to mow, and they you get a big machine to do it, exactly, and they've got $3.50 to get it done. Whereas smaller, more medium sized properties, they might be able to afford $150 for the cut, and you're like, sweet, I can do that in 20 minutes, awesome. And a lot of those jobs stack up to being a very, very profitable business.
That's right.
So bigger jobs aren't necessarily more profitable.
No, 100%. No. When I was at my peak mowing, at my biggest, we had 280 regulars. So that's when I had 2 trucks and 5 ride-ons and staff and everything. When the turnover was at its biggest, I should say, not the profit, the turnover was at its biggest, is that we were killing it doing house lawns. That's where all pure profit was from, because again, I geared the business up to be super efficient to do it. Like a standard day with the 2 trucks was 45 house lawns, and that's 45 house lawns is a lot of money in anybody's. Doesn't matter what you're charging an hour, like what the city guys charge or the country guys charge. If you can get through 45 in a day, your turnover's huge. But then you've got the added cost of 2 extra guys, an extra truck, extra gear, etc., etc. But if you're just talking on pure turnover, it was house lawns. But if you're doing big jobs where you're doing less driving, you can be more profit in the ride-on. And everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to be totally different. And again, it depends on what you want to do. Like some people, the idea of doing 20 house lawns in a day is like pulling teeth. They'd rather just get on a ride-on and mow acres and acres and acres. Whereas other guys don't want to do that. They don't want to have a big trailer and a big ride-on that they, and where you live is a big thing, like where you're going to park it. Do you have room to work on it? Things like that. So it really is just whatever works, like the battery gear, whatever works for you is going to work. If it works for you, it's right. And if it's chasing ride-on work is what you want to do, and that's where you can make your money, then that's where you should be. If it's not, if in your area there's just not acreage work to do, well then you're never going to consider a 48 plus size ride-on. You're going to be looking at 32 probably max. Yeah.
I want to shut this on the screen for a second, because I want to get your thoughts on this Skag product that I didn't even talk about in the podcast I did with them. Now, there's a few companies that do this, but let me just put this on now. There it is. This is a, what would you call it? A powered catcher that goes to the side of a V-Ride.
Yes.
And I've seen these, so I'll try and describe it for people who are not watching, although we are now uploading video onto Spotify, so people can watch and listen. But if you have a look at the thing on the screen, it is basically a ride-on mower with a power-assisted blower on the side, and then the catcher attaches to kind of a 45-degree angle, I would guess. So it's not where the operator would stand. And I've seen these in the States. I don't think there's any here. Obviously, Skag would have told me when I was at the warehouse. Maybe there's some secret ones hiding somewhere. But I look at that and I go, that's quite an interesting idea, because the problem I have with like Catch Pros, and I have them and I like them, is there's a certain size where you've got to empty that thing so many times it just becomes frustrating, and you just go, I just want to buy a walker, or I want to buy something that's dedicated to catching.
Yeah.
But this kind of might be for those people who are catching enthusiasts. Do you see a market for this? Is this the long-winded question I'm getting into?
In Australia, not really, because like if you've been to the States, you know what their fall, as they call it, their fall cleanup is. Like they get like a metre of leaves that they have to clean up. It's insane.
True.
The attachments like that are very expensive, and I guess, and the other thing too is that excuse me, that that catching system we're looking at doesn't fit a 32 or a 36.
Oh wow, really?
No.
Okay.
So it's only for a 48. So it's only for the velocity deck machines, which is 48 and up.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 32 and 36 run the advantage decks, which there's not a lot of difference really, but they're the smaller versions. But yeah, and the other thing too is the weight. So if you fill that thing up, compact it in, you're probably going to do wheel stands, even though they come with a weight kit. On a 32, it's probably probably too much. Yeah, look, I just don't think it's. Look, I don't even know if Skaggs brought one in, to be honest. I did have one inquiry about it once from a guy up in Queensland. Asked me if my opinion on him, and he had a 32. So I said, well, no. I said, mate, go and buy Catch Pro.
Yeah.
Because it's not an option for the smaller decks anyway. So in Australia, no, I just can't see catching/bagging is a thing for us. Yeah, and if you've got to catch grass for a living, then you need a dedicated mower. You want a Walker or a Gianni Ferrari, because that's what they're built for.
Yeah, no, that's where I'm at, and I guess it's a certain type of client who needs it, because if you're doing acreage stuff, then the mulching, side discharging, when there's a lower expectation there, but it's more like some retirement villages or private schools, wherever, where they're like, no, the clippings being on the lawn and then kids rolling in wet clippings is not exactly what we want.
Yep.
So. Anyway, it was just something I was curious about. Another thing is with robot mowers, they all come with, you buy a robot mower because you don't want to do any work, and then you have to change the blades. And I was thinking, I was like, is there such a thing as a completely tungsten blade? Like you could have like some super hard metal blade, so that it's a really long lasting blade.
I know, like Husqvarna have some more durable blades than other brands, like their endurance blade, and then they've got possibly another one out that I haven't had to deal with yet. So they do last longer than your normal blades. I mean, so at the moment I've got a Segway running around in my backyard. Just basically whenever I get a product, I like to take one home, especially a robotic product. I take one home and use it so I can get my head around the app, get my head around its idiosyncrasy, so I know what I'm talking about. The app tells me when it's done 80 hours, you should change the blades. It took me 5 minutes. It wasn't that big of a deal, but yeah, I've got customers with robots. So obviously we've been selling the Husqvarnas about 6 years. So I've got Husqvarnas out there 6 years old, and they only get a blade change when I go and do it, because they just don't do it. It's just, it's not doing it.
That's what I'm getting at, though.
Well, they'll bring it into me and say it's not cutting real good, and I'll flip it upside down, and it's got a blade missing, or there's just nothing left of them. It's just like, give me 5 minutes, I'll change your blades for you and charge you, and and off they go. So, look, robots aren't for everybody. They've got their place. What they do they do well. But you know, is there going to be a robot in every house? No. You know, my target audience for robot sales are places where noise and privacy is an issue. So places like wineries, wedding venues, motels, you know, things like that. They're the guys that are going to buy the big ones. You know, yes, I want to sell you $2,000 Segways, but you know, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we play in that market because the market's there. And again, the reason I play in that market is that I'll sell a 500 square meter cheap low end Segway, which is doing a great job, by the way. I'm very happy with it. To somebody, and again, they'll tell that it's 10 people, and then someone will come in and want to buy one that does 3,000 square meters. And then someone else might come and want to buy one that does 5 acres. And all of a sudden, then we're talking big money. But the more you get out there, the more you will get out there. It's like the V-Rides. The more I got out there, the more I did get out there because everyone talked.
Yes. One more question I've got for you. You see walk-behind mowers come with bar blades and swing-back blades. Ride-on mowers, for the most part, only come with bar blades. Although my walker has a kind of bar blade with swing-back blades on the end of it, if you get what I mean.
I do.
Why don't we see more swing-back blades on ride-ons? Because surely that would protect the spindles. Like, could you have 4 blades on a disc like you kind of have? I don't know. I'm genuinely curious. What's the problem there?
Well, you may have answered your question about when you asked about the blades on the robot, because with the swingbacks you'd be changing them a hell of a lot more often than bar blades. I don't really know. My best, this is a guess, but now that I'm thinking about it on the run, is because my answer would be because all the ride-ons are made in the States, and all the States do is bar blades. They don't do swingbacks.
True.
So that would be my answer. Like I know Massport, everyone's seen the Pro Power and the Massport contractor mowers, self-propelled and pushies. Massport sell them into the States. I'm not sure what success they have, but they sell them into the States. In Australia, they got swingbacks. In America, they put bar blades on because that's what the Americans want. So, and I actually, I used to run the Honda 216. So obviously I got out before the blade clutch came in. But I used to put a bar blade on my Hondas. Just a bit of a trivia for you.
Just to make a difference, or did you find, like, what difference did you find?
Catching ability was, so I used to fit, I made my own Boss. So what the blade bolted to, I made my own, and I used to run the Arians / Gravely, 21-inch bar blade, because it mulched really, really well, and it caught, it was crazy the way to catch. Like, if you had a dry lawn and your revs, you got your revs up, $3.5 grand on your revs on your engine, half the time it'd blow the catcher off. It used to catch that well. And we had a couple of lawns that we did have to hand mow. That one in particular I mentioned, that was a really big, probably 1,000 square meter property with a house, so probably 800 square meters of grass. Waterfront property, was really lush, Sir Walter Buffalo, and it had to be caught. And they paid overs for it to be caught. They just were happy to pay. That's what they wanted. And with the with the swingbacks, it did a good job. But when we put those bar blades on, it used to catch sensationally. Like, it was insane the way to pack it into the bag. Yeah, and I always like fiddling. At the moment, I've halfway through what I hope is going to be an invention to take to the Equip Expo in 2025. I I'm behind schedule where I want to be on that, but yeah. So I'm looking for that next step all the time, that next bit of innovation. That's what keeps me sane from running the business.
Well, that's debatable. I've seen some of your jokes.
That keeps me sane. That keeps me sane as well.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, that sounds interesting. Is that something you want to talk about, or is that all hush hush?
It's not something I can talk about because we're at the stage now where I've got the prototypes. I hope to have them back in the next, or by the end of January, and then they'll go into testing. I've got a few guys agreed to sign non-disclosure agreements to test them, and then if that all comes back happy, then we start the official patent registering process. So once that we get a patent pending on it, then I can talk more about it. But it's an accessory for a ride-on. That's all I'll say.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward. When you release it, we'll have you back on. We can
talk for sure.
Tell the world. On that note, I got to say, because people, if you're listening, on the bar blade, swingback blade things, put some comments in, because Spotify has comments now. I read the comments. YouTube has comments. Because I'm curious as to whether or not there is such a thing with a disc and swingback blades, and what people's experiences are.
I know.
And also,
sorry, just
yeah.
I know, like we sell GAs, like Gripsky sell them. Is I think Stens might too also. Is a conversion kit for a few brands. So like Husqvarna and your Cub Cadet / MTDs, their spindle mount is a star. And if you hit something hard with your bar blade, you can shear that star, which means you either got to replace your spindle or just a spindle shaft. Whereas like on your Skags, your Toros, your Wrights, all that sort of stuff, it's just a flat mount from your bar blade onto your bottom of your spindle. So you can't really damage your spindle by hitting something. So what they've come up with is an adapter. So it's a little short bar, probably about 8-inch, 200 mil maybe, and it's got the star fitting to fit onto your Husqvarnas or your Cubs, and then it has swing backs, and it's got all different holes and then you just work out what deck size, what length blade you'll use.
Which one suits.
Which one suits and what hole you can fit it in to make it work. So we do sell those to a lot of private owners who buy our Husqvarnas, and they've got a lot of rocks. So they're forever bending blades, and so they are out there, and I'm sure there's people who do swing back conversions for them. I just don't know the cut quality difference. What it would be? Probably, I'd imagine the swing.
That's what I'm curious about, because I've found with the bar blades, I was really interested in what you said, because it's obviously got to do with the blade. Because all the battery mowers that I've used are using a low lift bar blade, and it's designed to prevent unnecessary battery wear.
Yeah.
Now, my philosophy is I think that's backwards from a contractor's perspective, because I'm going to make more money from a more efficient blade. So I could afford more batteries, if that makes sense. So if I have to go over a lawn twice to cut it properly, I don't really care what the battery is. Battery runtime is if I can change the blade, something that's a bit more exhaustive, but still does it in one pass. And I think, like, from a contractor's machine, cut quality, performance over everything. Because the other thing that happens is these battery runtime stats that you get are usually academic in difference. And what I mean by that is if you've got to change your battery twice, so you've got to use 3 different batteries throughout a day, if you are saying using 2.5 batteries, a 10% or 20% drop in performance means that you're getting 2.9 batteries. In other words, you're still using 3 batteries in a day, slightly less, it actually doesn't cost you any more. It's the difference when you're like, I've got to go from 2 to 4 batteries in a day. Anyway, so a little rant I've got is the bar blades that I've used on those machines, I'm not a fan of. The bar blades on the Time Master, they seem to do a a pretty good job. Obviously, the Time Master is not really for overgrown stuff, but yeah. Anyway,
I guess you got to remember.
I'm curious on
with the bar blades / swingback is that the Australian market is minute. Everything is about America, and so that's why there would be bar blades on battery kit, because they're trying to play in the biggest market, and like you've only got to look at like there's a brand like the Honda. They've got the 216, which is we've got the swingbacks, which is made for the Australian conditions. I believe it's still assembled in Melbourne. I could be wrong there. But everything else is bar blade for the American market. They don't cut low enough for the Australian market. They've got 4 height adjusters. The Yanks like 4 height adjusters. Why, I don't know, but they do.
Nobody knows. No. I don't even think the Yanks know. They just do it.
They just do it. I know it is cheaper to manufacture, but
okay.
But they could charge extra and have a single height adjuster. I don't know. Anyway, so I think a lot of those questions you have is simply because that the machines are not built for our market.
True. Well, mate, we're coming up on 2 hours.
Yeah, man.
If people have made it this far, right, and they've been interested in what Scott's saying, you should be sharing this podcast around people, especially if there's something about the lawnmower dealer life that you've learned and you think other contractors need to hear this too, whether it's Scott's shop or wherever they are in Australia. Have some understanding that business is tough, whatever you're doing, so support your local mower shop. Anything else you want to say, Scott, before we head off?
No, not really. I just if you're in the industry, I think you're in a really good industry. I've been in it 25 years now, obviously with both hats on. The next phase of my business life, when I finally do sell the shop and do something else, will be in the industry, because I'm quite passionate about it. It's an industry where you don't have to go to university to make great money. You can make a great living out of it. You're outdoors. You only just got to look at LNCA. It's full of good people. And if you're in it, stick at it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm always happy to talk to people. I'm easy to find. Yeah, so thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, people, and we will see you all in the next podcast. I once spent $40,000 in a single year on Google AdWords. Here's my thoughts. Here's a little secret. Let me tell you about the power of 1% thinking. This is like a nuclear weapon for businesses. Should I buy clients? Is that a good option for business?
Luke Smith is a former professional athlete, host of the Australian Lawn and Garden podcast, and lawn care business owner with over 10 years experience serving thousands of clients.
So there are 3 ways that you can raise prices. There's a simple way and there's 2 more technical ways. I think those 2 technical ways are really where it's at. A lot of people make this major mistake.
The next area I want to show you is how to integrate AI to all of these different functions.
After dozens of value-packed small business podcasts, people wanted more. So he created the ultimate course for Australian lawn and garden small businesses. 47 lessons that cover all the subjects you need to know to start and run a successful business. You'll get access to exclusive discounts from world-class brands, saving you more than the cost of the course. Join a supportive community for real-time advice and enjoy a 7-day, no questions asked money-back guarantee.
There is a massive problem with Instagram when it comes to getting business. Discounting to win a job is a trap.
The reviews speak for themselves. If this sounds like the course for you, click the link below.